Hi everyone, I wanted to talk with you today about the Middleman News app demonstration that Skip and Trey did for us from Vox Media. Wanted to go through it with you one more time. I wanted to indicate that I made a few changes to it and put it on my GitHub so you can find it under GitHub/CindyRoyal/top_albums. There were just a couple things with the relative references that I figured out. To get started, I want to go through it. I've already done it. I want to go through all the steps that you'll need to go through to get it to work on your own computer, which means some of these things that we had to do in the lab computers we don't have to do. You'll want to run this mkdir to make sure that there is a gem directory that you have on your computer. And then you don't have to do the rest of this because you will have access. In some cases, when you run some of these commands, if you end up getting an error message, you might include the sudo, super user do, in front of it first, and then it will ask for your username and your password for your computer. It just depends on how you have your computer set up. And I have tested these on a Mac, of course, so there may be some differences in using it when we get to, or if you're using a PC. So you want to come here and after you get everything set up, you do want to check and make sure that you have Ruby installed on your computer. And you should have it automatically there. If you have a Mac, you may need to do some Googling to find out if you need to upgrade, update. I'm using just regular Ruby, not the Ruby version manager. And so sometimes you just have to update the gems or update the system. So for instance, the gem update -- system will update all the gems for you on your computer and make sure everything's up to date. So if you run into some problems with that, let me know and I can kind of go through some of the steps. You have to read the error messages. But you want to be able to do gem install bundler and gem install middleman. Now here, let me open a new shell and just show you when I talk about finding Ruby versions, I'm just going to put that in and say Ruby -- version just to see what I have on my computer. And I've got Ruby 2.0. So I think we also used it with a 1.9 version of Ruby and it should still work. So you can do that just to check to make sure you have Ruby, and then you'll do gem install bundler, gem install middleman, and as I said, if you need to do the sudo in front of those for it to ask for a password, you can do that to get these installed. So first of all, what we want to do, we're not going to clone the GitHub version, we're going to write it from scratch. So the first thing you want to do is initialize a Middleman app, and that's this first line of code here. That's Middleman init, and then whatever you want to name it. So it would be Middleman init top albums. And I've already done that. By doing this, it goes into your home directory, and I'll show you on the Mac how you're able to find your home directory. But that's the first thing. Is sort of CRoyal is my username. That's the area that when I open up my terminal, that's the location that I'll be in. And of course I can do ls to see what's in there. There's a lot of things, and you can see top albums here. So I'm going to cd top albums so that I'm in it. And just like we did in the lab, just to make sure everything's working, I'll say middleman server, make sure that's working. And it's working, and I should then be able to go to the browser and go to this URL or localhost :4567 and open it up. And if you haven't done the app yet, it should say the middleman is watching you or something like that. And that lets you know that middleman is working. And then something that we'll do when we are done is be able to build it, middleman build, and that will do the static site generation. We haven't really built anything yet, but we'll do that soon. So if you have the server running and you want to turn it off, you just do Control-C and hit enter, and that will turn off your server from running. So the process is that we're going to create a Middleman app. We're going to make some changes in it so that we can design it the way we want to. Some of it will be HTML, some of it will be Ruby, some of it will be CSS. And then we will test it on the server, running the server, see if it all works. Then we will generate a static site so that we can upload it somewhere without having to have Ruby or Middleman running on the web server that we're going to be using. Okay, so the first thing we want to do here is we've initialized it. So when you initialize it, you should be able to go to your Finder and see it. If you can't find your home directory with your username on the side, if you just do Command-Shift-H for home directory, it will take you to your home directory. And we'll see here that I have top albums from that init command. All we did was run that command, and then it created this whole sort of framework of files for me to use. So I'd want to open that whole folder up in Text Wrangler. And we can open a whole folder up in Text Wrangler just by clicking on the folder once and saying open, rather than opening up the folder. So everything's here. Everything under source that we'll need, and everything under data that we'll need. So the first thing we want to do here is modify the layout. And what we'll do in this is grab the code that has been provided to us and put it in the layout.erb file. So let me open that up under layouts, layout.erb. And you can see here we're just this code that was created, which is just going to put the name of the site in a list item and a link to the home page, so that anytime it gets linked, it's going to click onto the home page. And then these social buttons for Twitter and Facebook. So you don't even have to have those on your site. That's just something that Skip added to be fancy. We're going to be changing the CSS file. And so what I did was I downloaded the GitHub so I could grab the CSS file that Skip had made and put it into the style sheets directory here and include that so that it references it instead of the old CSS that came with Middleman. Again, that's just for layout and design. You can do your own CSS. You don't have to apply this one that Skip did. He had some fancy things in there, some things about fonts, some things about Bootstrap, the grid, but then after that it's just, some basic HTML that gets things set up, or CSS rather, that gets things set up. Okay, so we've got this in the HTML page, and that's what is going to create the look in the HTML page of just, how to be able to click to go back, and sort of the header across the top with the social icons. We can see here where we are at index.html, we will add this series of divs that really is just a list that has a link to the 12 Labs HTML page and the Clockworks HTML page. And we will make those pages in a second. And this Lorem Ipsum here is just Greeking. You would obviously want to put whatever you want to do to describe the site. And the rest of this stuff is just some Bootstrap classes to set it up. So again, if you set it up in some different way, we're only really worried about this list right here that has the usernames in it. So we want to add the files for 12labs.html and clockworks.html, and we have to put the ERB at the end because we're going to include some Ruby in them. So to do that, we can just right-click on source in Text Wrangler and just say new folder, new text document. And then you'll make each of those two documents. So I have 12labs.html.erb and clockworks.html.erb, and they exist. And we're going to take advantage of this partial feature, which has the underscore at the front of it, so that we can actually make a template for it, and then both of these will take advantage of those templates so they'll look roughly the same. So we have those two files created, and then we want to get the data. And so Skip has shown us how we can run these nifty curl scripts that actually go to Last.fm, and they get the information that we need. We can kind of see here, if we look at this and kind of scrub it over, we see the URL that you need to go to for the API. You see the call for the user and the key for that user and the format of the JSON that it's supposed to be put in. So it does it for both of those guys, for Trey and Skip. And then the JSON is actually going to go into the data directory by doing that. So here's the data directory, and it's got the two JSON files. You can ignore those CSVs in there right now. And so all that happens by running this curl script because we told it to create this data directory, and that's where it's going to go. So now we want to use the JSON in our partial. So that's where we're going to now create a new folder just like we did before. You can right click on source and create a file called _albums.html.erb. That's what this one is right here. And in that file, we're going to create the template of how the pages are going to look for the pages that allow us to click on 12 Labs and Clockworks to be able to get into that. So here is the code that he wants us to use. Again, these divs are just for layout. We're going to have the list for classes for usernames, and we're going to have the two items that will take us to the page for 12 Labs and the page for Clockworks. That's it. And it just references the actual username here. And then what it's going to do here is a loop that's going to go through each item in the JSON and pull out the desired things that we want to have happening there. So it's an href to an image. And he's just doing the references to the image sorted by their rank. So the first most popular one, and then the image to each, and then it's going to have like a link to the page that it's going to go to that we're going to create as well. So just take this code and put it in albums.html.erb, _albums.html.erb, and then continuing on inside the 12 Labs and the Clockworks pages, we're going to pass the information for the partial. That's it. So these are just going to have one line of code to reference that partial that we just created here and here. So that's what those pages are going to look like. And that's it. So at this point, if we run the server and we go to the actual site, we should be able to see that the list of albums is being created. So let me do that. I will do Middleman server, and the server is running. So if I go to, in my case, I can use localhost because I'm in Firefox. It should have the app up and running. I've applied the new style sheet, so this looks nice. And then when we go to the 12 Labs page, we see all the items that are his favorite albums right now, the ones he's been listening to the most, and then the ones for Clockworks. Very nice. So the next step is, how do we create the link from each one of these albums? So come back here, and we want to create the dynamic pages for each album. So now we want to create the file detail.html.erb. It's right here. And put this code inside of that so that it will continue to have the links on the sidebar. So it's sort of the navigation for the site. And then it will have what we want each album to have in it on the page. So this is for each album that you click on, so it's going to reference whatever album is being sourced at that particular time. It's going to have the image for it, and it's going to have the artist name, the album name, and the URL, and a play count for it is going to show up. Pretty cool. We can look at that over here. And so that's just all that's in that file right there. It just references the data that's coming from the data in the spreadsheet or in the JSON file. So you can see here I made a few changes to be able to have this reference, since this is going to be in a folder down below the HTML page. We want to be able to go up and find those HTML pages when it creates it. So it's got the .. to make sure that all the navigation works. And if any of those don't work, you just have to sort of troubleshoot, like, why is that link not working? Why is it not connecting to it in a relative manner? Those are the changes that I made to kind of set up those things. And he says here, the page assumes that the username and album variables will be passed into it. And the way that we pass those into it is we go to the config.rb, which is right here. And at the bottom of that page, we put these several lines here that actually kind of connect it up with the data and tells it what to do in the loop to pass it. So we've got that in there. I put it at the very end. And then the only other thing we need to make sure that works is we want to activate these relative assets. That's a section that's already in the config.erb. And if you just comment out or get rid of the comment ## there, then that will make that activated, so that activate relative assets is working. And so when you do all of that, everything should work. And if we go to our site, we can click on it. And we're in 12 Labs right now. And we can click on one of these items and we'll actually see the album. We can see the name, and it actually has links to take us to the Last.fm site if we want to do that. And all that's data that came down from the JSON files that we executed with those curl commands, and then the number of plays. So we can actually go in and we can see what these guys are listening to. So I want you to think about how you might be able to use this for something. Maybe you're not using it for a call to an API. Maybe you've got some other way that you're using JSON data, that you want to present it in this way where you have a lot of information. You want it to be presented all the same way. So you want to be able to take advantage of this templating and partials that you can do by creating a Middleman app. I'm not going to go through the Google spreadsheet version because I think at this point we can create JSON files that can be read and be static, and not worry about adding the added plugin for getting the Google spreadsheet to work, but know that that is an option. And on the Vox Media GitHub, you can actually find some instructions for that. Here, Middleman Google Drive. They have an actual plugin that you can install and then make some modifications that you can have a Google spreadsheet actually instead of your JSON. So I hope that makes sense. Play with it. Play with this example a few times and get it working on your computer. And then think about ways that you can modify the JSON to be pulling something different, to be presenting something different that you might want to have. How can you design this differently? How can you use the CSS in different ways to present this in a different way than what Skip had done for us? But this is a very comprehensive example. The last thing, though, I should show you, because I didn't do that yet, is we've got this all running here on the server. But if we want it to be built to go on any server that's not necessarily running Ruby or Middleman, we want to build it. So it's just Middleman build that we would run with the server not running. So back to the top albums folder, you say Middleman build, and under the build folder, it's going to create the whole framework that includes the index page. It includes a page for each of the different sections, and then underneath each of these, you've got all 50 pages that gets created to handle every one of those top albums. So that allows it to do all that work for you, all the duplication. You did not have to create every one of these 50 pages. Middleman does that for you, but then when you say Middleman build, it executes the static site for you. And this is what you would load up to the web. This whole folder right here that has everything in it, and that works. And so I can look at that now without having to have the server running, and without going to the local host. I can do file open, and I can find my files. I'll do that Command-Shift-H again to get to my top albums folder. And I'll just open up under build the index page, which should be the home page of my site. And it should look exactly the same. And it should function and work for all the albums that these guys have. And it should go back and forth depending on the navigation that you have over here to be able to look at all the different things. And this is all functioning locally on the computer and can be easily added up. It can be easily uploaded to the server without having anything extra hosted on it, like having to have Middleman or Ruby or something like that. You may run into times where the images don't come up instantly. That's fine. Those images are being served directly from the Last.fm site, so it's possible that some of them don't have images, or that it might just take a little bit longer for it to reference them. But as long as you can see the general images coming up in most cases, and the links working to take you back to Last.fm, like this one should take us to Spoon on the Last.fm site directly, and it's going, excellent, then you know that you've got your whole entire application working. Okay, hope that helps. Hope you play around with this really cool way to get a framework and get a news app created.